Well, thank you guys so much for joining us this morning, braving the soggy weather, but I think we're going to be all right from here on out, maybe. We've got a lot that we could look at in the garden, and I love these kind of walkthroughs because it allows us not to have to concentrate on one thing or one topic, and we can kind of go off any way you guys are interested. And it allows us also to show you a lot of really amazing things you can do in your own home gardens with flowers that are blooming here in really for us is late spring, right? It's like for most of the country this is early spring, but for us it's kind of spring is waning and we're about to start summer flowering. So Juniper Level Botanical Garden is gifted to the state of North Carolina. And we are in the process of building an endowment for that. We've gotten some monstrous gifts this year. Yay, we're really happy, which has brought us closer to our goal. We still have a ways to go. But the garden is gifted to NC State and will be a sister institution to the J.C. Ralston Arboretum with a slightly different focus. Our focus is definitely stronger towards perennial plants rather than being just an arboretum. And well, a lot of perennial plants because we have 27,000 plus different varieties of plants growing in the garden right now. We've grown 84,000 different kinds of plants in the garden. Okay, what does that mean? It means if you think you're the only one that kills plants, we killed 2 out of every 3 plants. Okay, so that's part of that's to me one of the most important things about botanic gardens is we grow things and kill them so that we know they won't grow for you, right? You don't have to worry about killing them. Yeah, it's exactly right. There's always, if you're not killing plants, you're not gardening. That's what I always say. So let's start out looking at some of the crazy things that are blooming right now that you might not see in any other garden in the world. And a great example of like how a plant gets from where it grows to your garden. This is Penstemon and red flowers. So what do you think? Hummingbirds, right? Red is always a bird coloration. If you see something red, whether it's a berry or a flower, it's there to attract birds. And Penstemon havartii flowers in the spring. It's actually a woody penstemon. So we think about penstemons kind of being short-lived perennial plants. This is a relatively long-lived. It's actually short-lived for a shrub, but it actually develops a woody base. All right, so I had to scale on a cliff. I was hanging from a cliff, Sean Hogan holding my arm as I'm hanging over the cliff to get to the 9 seeds that I could collect off this plant in the Davis Mountains of Texas, where it was growing on this sort of sheer wall along a road that had been blasted of granite where it got a start. Brought those 9 seeds back, started them at Heronswood Garden, had 3 of them that I decided I wanted to bring with me when I came to Plant Delights. So it came from Texas 2 years ago, started at Heronswood, grew over winter. I brought it here last year. We planted them in the ground having no idea whether it'd be hardy, whether it would survive our summers, whatever. And it did, and it's wonderful. So a plant that we haven't experimented with yet to see if it'll grow outside of these raised berms. Maybe it'll grow in standard garden soil. Nobody knows because nobody's really grown this plant in the eastern U.S. before. But, you know, what an amazing thing. And not Harvard. You have to, my accent tilts towards Brooklyn if I keep talking, so it'll start out, I can start out southern and then I'll end up back in Brooklyn. It doesn't matter what I do, but it's not Harvard, but Havard, after a guy named Havard, Penstemon havartii, so pretty cool stuff. Well, we don't know. It started flowering about 2 weeks ago. It looks like it's going to flower for another 2 weeks, so at least a month, and it may actually produce side shoots here if we trim back the blooms and be able to carry all the way into summer. But who knows? You know, we don't know. Like it was, yeah, all winter long, yeah. So we're pretty sure it's good and winter hardy because it's from.
Did it get down to last winter?
11. Yeah, but where we collected it gets down to 0. So not worried about the winter hardiness, worried about the summer wetness more than anything with this plant. And winter wetness. Down below it, just finishing blooming, is a plant called Europhylla henryi. This plant started blooming in December and has bloomed this little white flower. Last flower I think we have on this, which tops off 5 months of flowering for this plant. It comes from cliff faces in Yunnan, China. Nobody's grown it at all. These are the only plants in any garden in the United States right now. And we planted it here, not knowing that it probably has a lot more adaptability. This is going to be a great garden plant. The first seed produced in the United States are on this plant right now. We're collecting them. We're going to trial it in other beds, and we'll do that for a couple years before we offer it to share with the community, because we want to know that it's a plant that's going to do well for you. So that's kind of what we do. We'll see lots of Baptistia blooming this time of year. Mr. Schmidt over here, Jeremy, is doing a Baptistia talk at 2 o'clock, so I'm not going to spend that much time on Baptistia because he knows more about Baptistia than I could ever learn in a lifetime, because he's in charge of the research gardens here and does all the breeding and works on all the breeding with the Baptistia. But there's a beautiful screaming yellow. That yellow Baptistia over there is Baptistious Ferocarpa from Texas and Oklahoma, called Screaming Yellow. I love that plant. It's a good early Baptistia, kind of mid-early time, and it has a beautiful yellow flower, lasts almost a month in flower. So some of them, most of the Baptistias you'll see we grow for flowers. Some we grow for foliage. Look at this crazy thing. This is Baptistia perfoliata, which looks like a eucalyptus. Except if you look down here, it's got one little pea flower in each one of those perfoliate leaves. Now, perfoliate refers to a term, that's a term we use for a connection of a leaf that looks like it's been skewered by the stem. Okay? Perforated, right. So you have a Uvularia perfoliata, Baptistia perfoliata, and anytime you see perfoliata, it looks like the leaf has been perforated by the stem. This one's called cat bells. It's a native of South Carolina and Georgia, and in sandhills and really dry, sandy situations, grows anywhere in a garden. It's one of the best plants for foliage that you can put in your garden, and gives you the opportunity to have that weird look of a eucalyptus in a native plant, and it produces one little pea pod with one seed in it from that one flower, and it rattles when you walk through it in the sandhills of South Carolina, and so it's called cat bells because they sound like a little cat bell, right? It's yellow, but it's, like I said, if you're growing that for a flower, you appreciate flowers more than I do. And I appreciate a lot of weird things. There is a very strange, you guys like lady slipper orchids? Yeah. All right, there's a very strange one over here, and it's a good example of something that, only because people love orchids, would you ever grow a plant like this? Let's see, hopefully it's still here. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Oh, where did you go? Well, where's it at? I just looked at it. Oh, there it is. And it just finished flowering. Never mind. Well, that was a bust. I just looked at it before I got sick last week, but it had green flowers. Well, there you go. Done. It was green. It's called Cypripedium henryi. Is there of the henryi? Good, good. Also, we have a ton, you'll notice, of what we call aeroids blooming right now throughout the garden. A lot of the Amorphophallus, the Erasemas, there's an Erasema blooming right there. Crazy looking one. And one that looks a bit more like a typical local Erasema here, but with some variegation in the leaves, like a jack-in-the-pulpit. Erasemas are easy to identify because what people call the flower is not a flower, right? So we have a spathe right here on the Erasema, which is a leaf, okay? And we have a spadix in the center here, which is a spike that, if you look way down at the bottom, has individual tiny male and female flowers on it. And the flowers on a jack-in-the-pulpit are actually those little bitty things there down at the base, not this. This is a leaf and an extension of the stem of the plant called a spadix that has all the flowers wrapped around it. Okay? Too bad it's not sunny because these are amazing. Why does it do that? That's a whole class that, but I'm talking about it on next Saturday, or this Saturday, I guess, with the Jurassic Garden. Aeroids are a very ancient group of, ancient lineage of monocots. And the original monocots, like the most ancient groups, are things like sweet flags, which just have a spike of flowers. And to develop the monocot flowers like lilies that we think of today, The lily flower is not really the same as a ranunculus flower or a rose flower in its parts. It has what we call tepals, petals and sepals some people call, but they're really tepals in monocots because they're secondarily derived petals and sepals, because the ancestor of all monocots had no petals and tepals. It just had anthers or stigma and no petals or tepals, so they had to secondarily develop those over time. So these aeroids all specialize. They're ancient. Almost every ancient group of plants, and there is no such thing as an ancient, it's as modern as you and me because it's still around, right? But its lineage goes way back in history, much farther than other plants. And almost everything that has that ancient lineage has flowers that have a horrible smell or smell like Concord grapes, or they produce heat. So ancient groups of plants are things like magnolias, Elysium, the star anise. The aeroids are ancient monocots, and a lot of them smell stinky, and they almost all are pollinated by flies or beetles rather than bees. Now why? There were no bees until the Cretaceous period. These plants are older. Okay, their lineage goes back before that. And because it goes back before that, they had to be adapted to the pollinators that were around, which in most cases, some of the more ancient lineages, flies and beetles. So these are tricking the pollinator to visit the flower by smelling like something that a fly wants to lay eggs on. So they either smell like rotten meat or they smell like dung, right? So the fly's going to go in to get food, or the fly's going to go in and lay her eggs. And these that smell like rotten meat, the fly actually goes in and lays eggs. They hatch out into maggots that starve to death, and the plant is taking advantage of the pollinators, called pollinator parasitism. And if you're tired of like always having the animal, like the squirrel and the rabbit and the deer, taking advantage of your plants, plant a bunch of pollinator parasites and turn the tables.
I had a horticulture land in my yard when konjac was blooming one time.
Thinking it was rotten meat? Yeah, yeah. Really incredible stuff. All right, let's see if we can make it. Baptistia minors are amazing plants. So many of us grow the Baptistia Australis. All the native plant people, grow Baptistia Australis. Baptistia Australis is not native to North Carolina, first of all. It's native north and west of here, but it's not native to North Carolina. Baptistia minor is a variety is native to North Carolina, minor vara barons. But Baptistia Australis is all foliage with a little bit of flower out on the ends. It's real gangly, and then at the end of the year, or at the end of flowering, the foliage starts to look bad. Baptistia minor is mostly foliage with flowers that stick way up above it, and minor because it's shorter, it's smaller than Baptistia Australis. So we use minor a lot in our breeding program here to give us flowers that are well separated from the foliage, and to give us more compact foliage. So yeah, minors are just amazing, and actually all the Baptistia we grow are amazing. Of course, I'm the guy that thinks a little green flower is amazing, so. The salvias are a great group of plants to grow. Most of them are very attractive to hummingbirds and butterflies. And you're used to seeing a lot these days the Salvia Greggii and Microphyllus that are become very popular in the trade recently. But this is a nice blue flowered one called Salvia Camadoria, which is flowering from now till hard frost in the fall. It flowers heavy in the spring, it flowers heavy again in the autumn, and it spits flowers throughout the season, just like Salvia Greggii does, but gives you a much different palette of color to look at. And salvias are just wonderful plants. I mean, farinosa, look at this thing. You almost wouldn't realize it was in the same group of plants because it's such a different growth form than the others. There is a really cool plant over here that's just starting to flower. We talk about it more in the summer open houses, but it's Berlandiera, one called Chocoholic. It's just a selection of a plant that's actually native to North Carolina, but the selection was made in Texas. Berlandiera pumila, which means tiny. This thing is not tiny. It gets up this tall. But the really cool thing about this plant is it flowers from now till fall. It's non-stop through September. And its flowers smell just like chocolate, like a Hershey's Kiss. So as it warms up during the day, in the morning, warm mornings, those flowers will start to smell. And it may be too cold to get that scent out of it right now. Most things, scents are mostly tied to heat. So you don't see a lot of things smelling good right after a rain. Did you get the chocolate? Yeah, it's really amazing. That's another Baptistious Ferocarpa. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it? Yeah. Also, you have to appreciate all the cacti that we have. We curse them all year long because we always, imagine weeding these beds all the time. You know, you get a lot of cactus thorns and agave spines through your back, but when they're flowering, it's almost worth it. I love hardy cacti. Dahlias are starting to flower. Oh, you killed a dahlia? Dahlia, not dahlia, but dahlia. This is Dahlia lasianthera. And we work with a number of dahlias. A lot of the plants that I've introduced into horticulture are plants that I'm looking for something that is near native, meaning it's from Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, northern Mexico. Still North American, still supports native pollinators, still supports native insects or native birds, but it allows us to plant something we never have to water. Because in the future, if you don't think we're going to have to worry about watering, you're nuts. I mean, sheer population alone, without the stresses put on by vagaries of climate, puts a lot of stress on our water. And in the United States, we water with only drinkable water, which is crazy.
I know rain barrels, but I tend to...
Rain barrels are wonderful, yeah. In some states, it's illegal. I hate it. I hate Jerusalem sage. It's my least favorite plant. For no... I know. People love Jerusalem sage, and this is just a thing. I mean, I love it because it's a plant, so I love all plants. It's my least favorite love, right? It's like the girl who treats you terrible in high school, right? It's so Jerusalem sage. I'll tell you, I just don't like them. I mean, it's not anything against the plant. They're short-lived. They look good for a couple years, and then you really have to whack them back really hard, or and they have hairs on the leaves that when I have to trim them, fly through the air and make me sneeze. So Tony will kill me for saying I hate his phlomis, but I don't like it. I mean, but if you like phlomis, I like a lot of plants. Most people would say, why in the world would you like that? Oh, isn't that amazing? Yeah. And it's one of our most popular ones for, we give away pads at the summer open house. Yeah, and this is Combs Winter Glow, which is a hybrid prickly pear cactus with just incredibly vibrant flowers. People who grow roses have thorns, and they're terrible plants to plant here, tea roses, because they have every disease and problem known to man, and they're just not well adapted. But you can get just as beautiful a thing here. It has spines. Oh well, so the roses have thorns, but look at the beautiful flower show you get. It's every bit as beautiful as a rose. All right, let's see if we can actually make it to the garden up here. Told you I talked too much, so. We have a different variety of muscadines. So I wanted to point out a couple of things up here that are amazing plants if you're looking for something to put into your garden that I wouldn't be without. One is Dicentra is dwarf bleeding heart. Most forms of dwarf bleeding heart that you encounter in the trade are from stock from up north, and they don't do so well. This is a cultivar that doesn't need to grow in the shade. This is full all-day sun here, and it flowers all year long. Does not limit its flower to just in the spring. It's called Dolly Sods. It's from genetics of West Virginia, and despite the fact it grows in a cold place in West Virginia, it thrives here in the heat of our area. And this is the importance of having a garden like this. is that you can try and kill a number of different ecotypes until you find one that actually thrives. And Dolly Sods, which we sell, is one of the most amazing of those for the long-lasting flower. It's an interesting story. I used to teach plant taxonomy, so for me it's interesting. This is, some consider a poppy in the poppy family, Papaveraceae. Some people snap it out into its own family called Fumariaceae, but realistically it's a poppy with weird shaped flowers. Really odd.
Does it have to have full sun?
No, it grows in shade or sun, and you'll see them in the garden over here growing in the shade. Spigelia marilandica is another one of the most amazing plants you can grow in your garden. In North Carolina, it naturally only grows in one little piece of Graham County, way on the west side of the state, southwestern corner of the state. But it's common in South Carolina. It just hates North Carolina. It grows all around North Carolina, but not in North Carolina. And there are, again, a number of different forms, but what we've done here is what grows best for us. And then that clone that grows best for us is what we offer. And this one's one called Little Redhead, which is the dark red outer part of the flower and the beautiful yellow on inside contrasting. Flowers for several months during the late spring through summer. And then if you actually trim it back, it'll flower again. Get it to flower all the way till frost. Ragin' Cajun is another from Louisiana selection that we have. And that one has slightly oranger flowers and more of them. So Little Redhead has a lot of flowers, but Ragin' Cajun has just an amazing amount of flowers. We do it only through division so that we're sure what we're giving you is the exact genetic replicate of what's growing in the garden, right? So that's the way we do it. We do it outside in our production plots. We take them and divide them and plant them out and take them back up, divide them, put it in the nursery, put the divisions back out in the ground, grow them out for 2 years and do it all over again. So Ragin' Cajun and Little Redhead, if you don't have those, you're nuts. Those are great plants. Hummingbird pollinated, but also swallowtail butterflies love these plants. And you know, the common name Indian pink is Indian pink. We don't say Indian anymore, okay? It's woodland pink, okay? And so I worked for the Port Gamble Squallum tribe out in Washington State. We had this plant. We had a lot of things that had Indian in the name. And to them, it was very important to preserve the Indian in the name, because when you call it woodland pink, you're forgetting the fact, you're totally alienating the fact this plant was incredibly useful and utilized by Native Americans. So,
What did they make teas or what?
oh yeah, so this plant is a vermifuge, which means it kills worms.
Yes, it did.
Right, and so worms. So it, like pinworm, hookworm, the tapeworm, things, gutworms. And so up until the 1930s, you may not realize it, everybody in Wake County had worms. It was super common in the South because of the way, and I always thought, oh, I can't imagine people living with worms. I went to work in Southeast Asia, I came back with 7 species. Yeah, so I know what it's like to have the worms, and why this plant was almost wiped out of the wild, because it was so heavily overutilized, harvested for the root to make a vermifuge that could help people to expel the worms. So that's why it's called pink root also. And pink, not because it's the color pink, but the pink family, this is not in the pink family, it's Loganiaceae, but pink is an Old English term that refers to something that looks like it's been notched. So if you think about pinking shears, right? So to them, I guess, it looked like the flower had been pinked instead of being pink. Dianthus right here, if you look at the edge of the petals on the Dianthus, which actually aren't petals, they're modified stamens, but if you look at the edge of what looks like a petal on the Dianthus, you'll see it has been cut with pinking shears, and that's why that's called the pink family. You're just at the end of the Trillium. Oh, then the Laurentia is beautiful too. Look at that creeping blue thing, just beautiful little ground cover, Laurentia fluviatilis. You're sort of at the end of the Trillium blooming season, but I can't ever come through the garden even in the heat of summer without talking a little about Trillium, because it's what really got me interested in botany was Trillium.
Really?
Yeah, my grandmother was an amazing plants woman in her own right, and she loved Trillium. And she paid me $0.25 to go out in the woods and every Trillium I could find and put a flag by, and then I'd take her out and show her the Trillium. And when I was a kid, she read me, I didn't get read the Dr. Seuss and stuff. I got the Vascular Flora of the Carolinas. And when I went out and I found a Trillium, I couldn't say, hey, I found a wake robin. You found a Trillium erectum, right? So she taught me to appreciate knowledge of all kinds, really. But in the south, most of our Trillium have sessile flowers. I much prefer the sessile flower to the pedicellate flowered species, not just because they grow better here in the south, but because the flowers last forever. So these flowers last 2 or more months in some of these species. These have been flowering, this is going on 2 months on this is Trillium radianum, which is a newly described species, was just described last year from over west of the Appalachians. And down here is Trillium discolor from the Savannah River drainage of South Carolina, Georgia, and only around Whitewater Falls in North Carolina. It's one of the rarest Trillium in North Carolina, but common in the upstate of South Carolina. And so not only do their flowers last a long time, they all have, most of them at least, have variegated foliage to one degree or another, so the foliage is attractive, and they all have unique scents. So this one smells like cloves. Trillium discolor smells like cloves. A lot of them smell like dung, but or fungus or rotten meat. But some smell like spicy bananas, like Concord grapes, like cloves, there's an amazing variety of odors, and you can select ones that smell good, right? So I love Trillium discolor. That was the Trillium we had so much of down in South Carolina, around Clemson. I'm going to point out, boy, this another great example. Look how beautiful that dogwood is. Yeah. Yeah, that's a dogwood. That's a dogwood from, it's called Pagoda Dogwood or alternate leaf dogwood. It's the only dogwood we have where the leaves aren't opposite. They're alternate. So Cornus alternifolia is the name it used to be, because all dogwoods used to have the name Cornus. Now the only ones that are Cornus moss relatives, which don't look anything like this or like our flowering dogwood, and they're all European. And the ones that are here in the States, if they have the big bracts like Cornus florida, are the genus Benthamidia. So that's Benthamidia floridana. And if they have the flowers like this and the leaves really heavily veined, they're Svida. S-V-I-D-A, Svida. So it does, yes. So this one is a good example of something we think of being in the mountains or up north, and it shouldn't grow well here. But this is a cutting grown specimen from a local Wake County population. So you can even produce these beautiful pagoda dogwoods. And you can see why it's called pagoda. The branches come off in layers like this as it grows up, like a pagoda. Alternifolia. It does, yes, yeah. Bird consumed berries, just like all of our Svida and Benthamidia. A lot of orchids in the 41 garden, one of the reasons to come here. The Kalanthis are just finishing, and it's kind of amazing to me still that not a lot of people grow Kalanthis in their shade garden because they're beautiful. Very slow to produce, so if you're wondering why they're 60 to 70 bucks, that's why. Takes forever to produce them, but they're easy to grow, really, in a shaded garden, as long as you have good, high organic soil. If you can grow a Trillium, you can grow a Kalanthi. The rain knocked all the flowers off my beautiful Collinsonia verticillata. Those flowers to me look like, you remember the Martian guy on Bugs Bunny? I don't know why. The flowers just kind of remind me of a Martian with antennas sticking out or something. But that's the only spring flowering Collinsonia we have. May apples are sort of nearing the end of their bloom for most species, but yeah, this is not even a big one. So we think about May apples, the genus Podophyllum in the United States has one little white flower on Podophyllum peltatum. The Asian relatives of our May apple, sometimes put in their own genus, have red flowers. And actually this one here still They all haven't been knocked off. You can see some of the red flowers still on there, and we might see some others around. So much more dramatic leaves that last a lot longer through the year. A lot of them last right up to a really, really hard freeze in winter, and really make a dramatic statement in the garden. Those beautiful red flowers smell just like Wilkes County, North Carolina. They smell like chicken manure.
Oh no.
Yeah, and you'll walk through your garden like, oh my God, what's that smell? For just a couple days, they smell like chicken manure. So guess what they're trying to do? Lure in flies. This is a true dicot, a eudicot, and it is one of the most ancient groups of eudicots in the Berberidaceae ranunculales, which is the most primitive of the true dicots. And so it too has flowers that are mimicking the smell of something to trick pollinators to come visit. Isn't that something? Yeah, still bees. Look at this. This is another Asian mayapple.
Wow, that's incredible.
Isn't that beautiful? This is Podophyllum deforme, again with red flowers, right? But very different leaves than what we just looked at. It's really amazing plants.
The native mayapple with the white flowers, does that also stink?
No, native mayapples don't stink and they're bee pollinated.
Okay.
But the native mayapple, which we have, they mostly go dormant by May or June. So they're a spring-only thing. They don't have long-lasting foliage like these. And the fruit is edible on our native mayapple, but not the stem of the fruit or any part of the plant. That's poisonous. Really give you an upset stomach if you get any of that in there. And if you eat the fruit green, it gives you an upset stomach. And I always wanted to know, because there is a gourmet term for the flavor of a mayapple, right? It's called julaceous. Anybody in here a gourmet? Julaceous means earthworm flavored.
Oh no. I don't
So
know what an earthworm tastes like, but it doesn't sound
I
good.
tried the mayapple and I thought this is very different, and I had to try the earthworm. They taste exactly the same. Yeah, so yeah, I had to come down and show you the Hymenocalli lariosome. I think there's a lariosome, so I think, yeah. Hymenocallis are called spider lilies in the southeastern United States. They're a group of North American and South American, mostly southeastern U.S. and South American, and Mexican, Central American.
Is it aquatic?
It is, many of the species are aquatic. Some grow very well in just regular garden soil. But these are native amaryllids, so related to amaryllis. And big white flower, opens up at night, smells sweet. It attracts moths as pollinators. And one of the few really striking amaryllis relatives we have. But there's another one up here. Almost nobody gets a chance to see because it grows in a weird place. You probably have seen the Adamasco Lily, okay, which is another amaryllis. Zephyranthes adamasco. This is the other North Carolina and South Carolina native called Zephyranthes simpsonii, which only grows within a few miles of the seashore in southeastern North Carolina, northeastern South Carolina, southwestern South Carolina, and then Georgia and Florida. It grows in the in-between space between what we call longleaf pine savannas and wetland savannas and swamp forests. So those areas usually get corrupted very easily because of fire suppression in the savanna, causing just oaks and stuff to come up in the ecotone, in the transition. And so it's very uncommon today, except on a few roadsides in places like Georgetown County, South Carolina. They have upright flowers that never have tepals that fall back like Adamasco lily. So it's just one you almost never get a chance to see. So there's Simpson's rain lily, or Simpson's Adamasco lily. Oh, let's see, right here. Yeah, and Yellowwood flowering. So the really nice smooth bark, dark bark on this tree is one of the things I really love about it. It just has a really beautiful color, really beautiful form. So it's in the pea family, Cladrastis kentuckea. It's called Yellowwood. And because the wood inside, it has a yellow cast. And it's very easy to identify from anything else with compound leaves because it has alternate leaflets on the leaves. And it's flowering right now, which is really beautiful. And this is a native of North Carolina and South Carolina. Just one that today is almost gone. It is attacked by a fungal disease, very similar to the chestnut blight. And so in our mountains where it's moisture, it has struggles to grow. So there are very few healthy populations left. One good healthy one in South Carolina. But in cultivation, it makes a beautiful tree in the landscape and a beautiful street tree too, because it stays relatively small, 40, 50 feet at tops, and has a beautiful form and really is very nice all year long. And it only blooms for a few days a year, so you're really lucky to get to see the flowers on Cladrastis. These have been blooming for a month now. Cypripedium rascal.
I saw this one, I think, in the greenhouse.
Yeah, now people get scared off from buying cypripediums too because they're $70 or $60 or whatever.
90 was what I saw.
90 for some, yeah. So, and there's a reason. You know, if you're doing them from tissue culture or if you're doing them from, well, with these they have to be tissue culture. You're starting with a plant this big and it takes years to get them to the size that we sell them at. So a lot of the plants, when you see Trillium that are $45 and, you know, orchids that are $70 to $90, you thought, oh my gosh, how could they be? Most of those plants, if we've taken us 4 to 5 years to grow, we got $200 in them. We're selling them at a loss. But it's why lantanas are $30. We make the loss up by selling things that are easier to propagate, just so that we have the opportunity to be able to give you one of these without it being $200 and some. Because there's no profit in growing something like that or a Trillium. It's just merely done so that we can get the things we love out to you in a way. And yeah, isn't that incredible? You found the real beauty over here. This is one that we have, actually we have this for just a few plants left for sale. It's one of the rarest of our native lady slippers. It's called Kentucky lady slipper. Cypripedium kentuckiense. Has these beautiful cream-colored flowers, oftentimes more than one produced on the stalk, and it's one of the most heat-tolerant species that we grow. So when you're looking to buy a lady slipper or a cypripedium, never buy one that says 7A. If it says, you know, zone 2 to 7A, it means it wants cold nights. We don't have cold nights. So the species that do well, pubescens, that's a hybrid of there, and Kentuckiense are the two species that do well and transplant well into your garden. And then cultivars like Gisela, Otto, Rascal that clearly state zone 7B, okay, or 8A as the lower end. Those are the ones that you want to look for when you're trying to make a good informed decision and you live in the triangle area. They're not that hard to grow. You just need, if you can grow Trillium, if you can grow Mayaples, Epimedium, you can grow those. Here's one of the few Amorphophallus that has actually got a freshly opened flower right now. And it's one of the smaller. Yeah, they're called corpse flower because they smell like a rotting body. Amorphophallus.
Somebody tried to give me some of that and I said, oh no.
Yeah.
I don't want to smell it.
I think they're amazing. If you'd have been here 1 week ago, the whole garden was blue with blue phlox. And the Kalanthis were still blooming. Oh, here's a later flowering Erythema ringens. You can still see the weird cobra hood-like flower on that thing. It's not a flower, the spathe and spadix, the inflorescence. Some of the things I get so excited about.
I do too.
Like this is the genus Paris. And Paris is related to Trillium, Melanthiaceae, same family, the crow poison family. And this is a Paris Delavei, which probably the only Delavei in North Carolina. Paris is a very cool group of plants. There's another species here. It has, in most cases, has no color on the tepals, on the petal sepals of the flowers, but just has these really cool sort of geometric forms. But Paris Delavei is one of the few that has colored stamens, and it's very, very uncommon to see that in the southeastern United States. Out in the West Coast, they grew like weeds. So I got so used to having them in the garden out there that, yeah, isn't this a crazy thing? I never can say the last part of this. Romania is the genus, but Piasecii, Romania Piasecii, which we do offer this plant. This is a crazy thing. It's sort of snapdragon family, and humongous flowers. Doesn't look like something that would grow here, but does very well here in our climate. And part sun to shade, huge flowers, reseeds readily, but it's not a long-lived perennial. So you have to let some of the seeds come up in your garden to really enjoy it long term. It, trust me, has no problem seeding in. I take 90% of it out every year just to keep it kind of where it is. Yeah, the rhododendrons. I'll never grow a rhododendron here.
Well, go to the mountains. Up in the mountains is so beautiful.
Yeah, even in the mountains. And if any of you guys have ever been to the Seattle area, rhododendrons are so easy to grow there, and we have rhododendrons that, watch out, we have some traffic coming in, but we have rhododendrons from the macrophyllum group that have leaves that are like that long, and yeah. So if you're ever out there, go by the rhododendron species garden just south of Seattle, between Tacoma and Seattle, and take a look, because that's where rhododendrons like to grow. They grow here, kind of. Same climate. Yeah, they're invasive in England. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. The Himalayan rhododendron is super invasive out there.
I'm from north of Boston. They grow real well up there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we have so many other really cool plants that we can grow in the south. I don't know. So here's a wild one. The star anise. We have a lot of species, different species of star anise. This is a native called Alyssium floridanum. It has foliage like a rhododendron. We have a lot of them around the garden. When you're walking around the gardens, take a look at it. And they flower throughout the early spring, and they actually produce flowers all during the year. And if you've ever cooked with star anise, the fruit is one species only is edible. All the rest are poisonous. So this one is poisonous. This Alyssium floridanum is poisonous. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But the leaves smell like anise. The flower smells like dead fish. But you have to really stick your nose in it on a warm day to smell it. You can't, doesn't stink up your garden. No, it's just a beautiful, easy to grow plant for a shaded garden in lieu of rhododendrons for the same evergreen textural feature.
Is that a certain cultivar? Or
No, just straight floridanum, yeah. Another amazing group of plants to look at is, as you walk through the gardens, and we have some really huge flowered ones down below, but we have the largest collection anywhere of wild gingers or heart leaves.
I have some that came up voluntarily.
Serums, yeah, they're really amazing plants. Yeah, this one is a native one. They flower right now. This one has almost no flowers, but if we look around, we'll find some that have. But they smell like, not really ginger, they smell like root beer.
that's true.
Yeah, and the reason it smells like root beer is because the chemical in there is the same that's in sassafras root, which is the source of root beer. It's saffrol. All right, now Native Americans knew about that wonderful smell. They used it to flavor foods. They candied the rhizome of wild gingers, And they found out that it actually retards the growth of microbes on meat, so you can use it for preserving meat. Unfortunately, the FDA also found out that saffron causes cancer. So today, that's why you don't find naturally flavored root beer with sassafras root that often, because it's considered an unsafe chemical to consume on a regular basis, okay? So is everything else. I don't know. I had a grandmother, she drank sassafras tea her whole life. Did not die of cancer. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Here's a little showier. This is a little showier species from Asia, a Serum splendens. And look at the flowers on this one.
Oh, it's got flowers.
Yeah.
Do they stink too?
Rather big. Yes, they do. This is another ancient group of plants, another basal angiosperm. And just like all the rest of the basal angiosperms is tricking the pollinators to visit the flowers last a month or two because they're tricking it. Smell like rotten meat in most cases, but you can't really smell it. You have to get your nose right up in it. So even though the foliage smells good, the flowers stink. And again, a basal angiosperm. So we see that over and over and over again in these ancient groups of plants. They tend to stink. Is this a Raging Cajun? What is this one? Nope, that's just a straight Spigelia marilandica without a name on it.
It's blooming pretty well there.
Yeah. Yeah, Spigelia grows shade to full sun. Yeah.
I have mine planted in both places and they're perfect from one.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
It's an amazing plant, yeah. Here's one of my Paris.
Look at that.
Isn't that beautiful? This is Paris chinensis. And there's actually two here. There's another one that's getting covered up by the Triceratops here. And we haven't been able to make seed on this for a long time. So Johnny Appleseed and myself came out here this year with a paintbrush to take pollen from that one and put it on the stigma of this one so we actually have seed. Maybe we can make this. This is the one Paris that really does well in the southeast, is Paris chinensis. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is in what we would say, it's in riotous bloom. It doesn't have much color for a flower, but it's in riotous bloom. Well, thank you guys very much. I appreciated going on a nice end of the rainy morning walk with you and seeing the stuff. The sun's coming out. The rest of your day should be beautiful. You've seen a lot of pretty plants. Please help to support us here because our garden is strictly supported right now with the sales from the nursery. So my job and everybody who takes care of the garden and allows us to continue having a botanic garden is supported by the nursery now. So please help us out, buy some plants, take them home. That helps us out. And also, please, if you can, make a donation. We have a donation box up at our tent. And make a modest donation. It will help us get closer and closer to our goal of having the place fully endowed. Thank you so much.